May we have a moment of reflection, please? Okay, I would now like to read the Indigenous Acknowledgement Statement. I would like to begin our meeting by recognizing the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples of Canada as traditional stewards of the land. The municipality is located within the boundary of Treaty 18 region of 1818, which is the traditional land of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Wyandot peoples. Okay, now. You've all received the agenda that Sabrina sent you. Are there any additions to that to this agenda? Hearing none, I'd like someone to move that the agenda of January the 21st, sorry, the agenda of February the 18th be approved as circulated.
So moved.
I'll second.
Sorry, was that Gary move?
Yes.
Gary moved and Rob second. All in favor? That's carried. Does anyone have anything to declare? Good, it's like coming to the border, isn't it? Moving on to item C, we have 5 reports as listed there. Would someone care, so we can discuss these things at a later time, would someone please make a motion that this board receive as information items number 1 to 5 as listed?
So moved.
Juan and
I'll
second. Dorothy, all in favor? Carried. You've all received the copies of the a copy of the minutes of our first meeting, January 21st. Are there any errors or omissions? Hearing none. Excuse me, I thought I made a note here someplace. Hearing none, would someone please make a motion that this board approve as circulated the minutes of January the 21st, 2021 board meeting? A mover?
I'll move.
Rob, seconder?
Joanne?
Thank you. All in favor? That's carried.
Mr. Chairman, I'm in the meeting now.
Oh, that was fast. Hi, Jesse.
Hi.
Hey, Jesse.
Good. We also have minutes of the closed board meeting on January the 21st. I need someone to move that this board approve as circulated the minutes of that closed meeting of January the 21st.
And before you move that, Mr. Chair, we do have the option, since the minutes themselves have no confidential information, to approve as circulated the closed minutes of January 21st, 2021 board meeting for public circulation. If you would like to make those public.
Oh, I see what you're driving at. Yeah.
The conversation was what was in camera, but there's no reason why those resolutions can't be released.
Now, with that slight change in wording, may I have someone move that way?
I'll move.
Laurie, and seconder, Dorothy. All in
Thank you.
favor? Anyone against? Carried. Okay, now I can shut up for a moment. Couple of items coming up arising from those minutes. Sabrina, tell me about the real history films, and I must apologize because I forgot about them.
Oh,
Well, the launch happened on Saturday. They are publicly available and it will be listed in our minutes as well. It's also on our website through the YouTube. You can get to that. So they're still there. We had over 1,500 people view it in about that 24 hours, and it's still getting a lot of play. Our YouTube page will have a smaller amount of numbers than that full amount because most did go through the high definition platform that we were using for the launch, but we'll now see our YouTube site start to grow in numbers as well. We had international views, so Indonesia, places from all over the globe were watching, as well as quite a number, obviously local. And we do expect that the numbers that we'll be reporting moving forward will actually be significantly lower than the true watch, because in most cases, it was more than one person who was logged in watching at home at the same time. So our house, we had 4 people who were watching, but it only counts as one view for who's logged in as unique viewers. So excellent program, very successful, great feedback, and we'll continue to promote that as we move forward throughout 2021.
Anyone got a question for Sabrina? Nothing? No? Okay, thank you, Sabrina.
Just a comment, Mr. Chair, that it was a great presentation. The whole evening went very well, and the films are very good. If you haven't seen them yet, take a look at them.
And I understand you were on camera.
Well, just in the preliminary. I'm still not one of the old fossils.
Thank you, Rob. Okay, Sabrina, the other little item there, the nomination of board members to the OLS service assemblies, please.
So this one, we may want to defer to E3 since we're going to actually be looking at the correspondence that came on the assemblies, or we could deal with that right now. But the incoming Ontario Library Service is requesting each board to nominate one member of the board who will be the official representative, which is a bit different than the way the trustee councils used to do that. So we do need to make a recommendation and appoint one person, and then I will sign them up. And then out of that assembly, they will be sending one of their members to actually join the Ontario Library Service board. So something that members of this board may be interested in as well. So we can either make that nomination now, or we could wait until E3 after you've looked at the correspondence.
Does anyone have any preference? Would you rather wait until we go back to that correspondence? Get onto the
Yeah.
correspondence?
Yes.
Okay, we'll leave that one. I'll make a note of it here. Okay, so we will then move on. We have no deputations, I assume?
Just to accept the business arising from the minutes
Oh,
as
I beg your
information.
May I have someone move that we receive these, receive as information, the discussions on the business arising from the minutes? So that's getting difficult. I need a mover.
Dorothy has her
move.
hand up.
Oh, that hand, I thought it was I couldn't see it. Seconder? Oh, let Jesse. All in favor? Nobody's against this, carried. Okay, as I was saying, no deputations?
No.
Thank you. I assume we have no public on the public input today.
We do not.
Correspondence.
So we
Now,
have.
this is the item you're talking about. Yes.
Yes. We have 4. The first one
Mhm.
is the Assemblies Letter that actually came about the time of our last board meeting, but didn't make it onto the agenda in time. We did briefly discuss um, uh, the letter, and Lori had made a brief presentation. If there's any questions, I can answer those, as well as Lori, I'm sure, since she actually attended the last trustee council. But the letter describes how the SOLS and OLS North will be merged into one organization, which will be the new Ontario Library Service, that they will be making a interim foundational board that will be comprised of the board members that are currently there, and then at the AGM will be doing their next election. And then the first meeting of these assemblies, of which there are 9, and they are based on population, which you can see here. Each board is being asked to appoint and nominate one person to this assembly, and then out of the assemblies, they will be doing elections through their peers to be able to send people to the new Ontario Library Services Board in June.
I believe the main purpose of the assemblies is also the roundtable and the opportunity for trustees from each of the boards to pick each other's brains on some of the issues and solutions that they've been working on each by each meeting. They usually pick a topic of interest each meeting and ask people to talk about that. So there's an opportunity to exchange ideas.
Well, other than the pandemic, you mean each board have their own concerns that they raise and discuss with the other members?
They have the opportunity to put a question to the entire group. You can offer it in advance so that people have a chance to think about it and collect information if they need to. They often also propose a topic. So, for example, it might be about board recruitment coming up before a municipal election, about how one would recruit board members. So people share ideas on topics proposed, based on the sort of agenda of that period. And actually, some will also just pose a question at the meeting because if something has come up recently and they're saying, how is somebody handling X or Y, and get some ideas. So that's usually about half of each of those meetings, is that kind of discussion.
Which is very similar to what the trustee councils were doing in the past. It's just the trustee councils were only in the South, and they were face-to-face in the past until 2020. So now moving forward, they will be provincial, and they will again be twice a year, but they'll all be virtual.
But tell me this, using your example, Lori, how would the situation here, for instance, in getting new board members, would that not be completely different from somebody in North Bay or wherever?
People could have different methods for sure, but they'll often ask, how do you, for example, some boards, people get appointed year after year after year. And, so people might say, well, we need sort of new blood. How would we go about doing that? Municipality just keeps reappointing people. Or, I had a chance to talk about how we had done that, where we had offered to help the municipality in making their appointments and, putting a process in place. So it's a matter of sort of sharing best practices often.
Well, I suppose. So what's the question? What's the thing we're looking for here? Is it, would anyone like to volunteer to be a member? I don't hear anyone.
Morris,
Yes.
I guess I had expected Lori to step forward since she's so knowledgeable, but I certainly will give it ago. I have attended some of the trustee groups in the past. And as Lori said, I found it was informative, and also it gave a boost to make me feel as if our board is ahead in some domains, and some other points were not of particular interest.
Sabrina, is there a deadline for sending us information in?
The first meeting is in April, so they're looking for these to be done this month so that they have an opportunity to get the information to them.
Well,
March would be a bit late.
Pardon?
The March meeting would be a bit late.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, right. Thank you. No, Joanne, I take your point that you might look to Laurie, but Laurie has a lot of experience and much more than, I guess, most of us. It's
Yes.
not fair to sort of look to her all the time. And I'm very happy that you're sort of stepping forward and saying, well, you could be interested. Could I ask you to be the representative?
Yes, and I
Thank
do
you.
for guidance and consensus on the type of issues that are important to our board.
Well, I think
Can
that goes without saying, doesn't it?
Can I move that Joanne be appointed to the OLS Board Assembly from the Blue Mountains Public Library Board?
And Joanne,
Second.
you will accept that? Thank you.
Yes, I will. Thank you.
And someone to second that, Laurie?
I second.
Jesse? All in favor? I can't see hands, but I am assuming that there are no
Yes,
no's.
in favor.
Thank you. Carried. Joanne, you are now the appointee.
Congratulations, Joanne.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joanne.
And Joanne, I will reach out to you and get you the information and get you registered with them.
Thank
Good.
you very
Okay, Sabrina, we're back to you. We've got, tell us about these articles, etc. That
So the three correspondents that are remaining are from three individuals, and they are looking at the Collingwood Today article that was posted, and specifically the comments that were made by BMRA about the Blue Mountains Public Library budget and their opinion that the Craigleith Heritage Depot was not something that should be funded, and funding should be for a museum should only be through Grey Roots. So there were quite a number of phone calls and comments about that, and three members actually did send in letters and requested these to be part of our board correspondence.
thank you.
So those are public for anybody who does want to see them on our package.
Would it be fair to suggest that the BMRA got out on a limb a little too far?
We did respond because some of the numbers that were put into the paper were not accurate. And it was a comparison of unlike years, which we knew was one of the issues as the TBM budget was beginning to look at all of the departments and the library having the interfunctional transfers included this year, which made it appear as if there was, about a 40 or 50% increase. So those were things that were pointed out. So again, the dollars weren't like for like. The newspaper did make some corrections after the fact on those numbers, but by that point, sort of the cat was out of the bag and it had already circulated. Even looking at the Facebook posts that were being put out specifically on the Collingwood Today's page, and then the repost that was in the Citizens Forum, the majority of comments were very supportive of the library and very supportive of the museum, and talking about not being an increase, and actually, noting that we were on par with what the town had asked, which was to be aim for a 0 increase. We actually were below last year. We dropped by $1,500, not a significant amount, but in the grand scheme, we did do our bit not to have increases. And what was there would have been some of those labor numbers that we have no ability to work with. Those are, numbers that are set by the town. So I do think that the correspondence were quite successful from people, supporting us. And I do thank the 3 members who wrote to the board as well as wrote directly to the BMRA. And I think that this is something not to, we don't want any attacks between organizations, but we do want to be able to show that as a non-for-profit, we do not have the ability to be an income generating organization. And that was one of the comments that were actually on the Citizens Forum page, that we, both the library and the museum under Blue Mountains Public Library, are easy targets when it comes to budget time, because we don't bring dollars in, but from the impact of our services, we need to be looked at not as a revenue generating group or independent from the town, because it is the tax base that supports public libraries.
Do any members of the board have any questions or comments on what Sabrina said? Thank you, Sabrina, on that. Would someone care to move that that this board receives the correspondence as information?
Can I ask as well that we send a letter of thanks to the people that have written in support of us?
Yeah.
Sounds good, Sabrina.
Certainly.
A motion to receive that correspondence and discussion? Thank you, Rob. Move, and the seconder, Laurie. All in favor? Carried.
So the motion will go on and say, and send a letter of thanks?
Yes.
Of course, yeah, sure. I'm a bit casual on that one because the other one was a kind of a consensus thing, Laurie. Okay, moving on. Here we get to the interesting part. At least I think it'll be interesting.
All right. So our
F1,
action.
That's you, Sabrina, again. Yes.
Action plan. So our update, just so that we have some numbers to look at, we are just over 14.5% completed in the first 45 days. So we are well on track of doing the work of this action plan. There are 82 outcomes that we are looking to do. 11 of those have been achieved. 3 of those are things that we would consider are ongoing. So once we've started them, we don't list it as completed, but we do list it as ongoing, because like the key messages, we know we're doing that. And then we're going to be addressing today 8 out of those 82, which is another 10% on our agenda. Although those will not all be resolved today, they will certainly be addressed. I'm only going to point out a few things, and certainly if there's questions, I'll take them. I've made a change from previous years, and you can see that in C1, where we used to have a number of places like it is in this action plan, where it identifies numbers that we're trying to hit targets on. So instead of simply knowing that we want to hit 1,500 on the newsletters, and then at some point in the year I tell you we've hit it, I will update the status monthly so you can see where we are with numbers. So you'll see those growing. We are well on our way, and in some cases nearly at the target, and we do hope to surpass them always. We're also going to be launching, probably in March, a LinkedIn page that's going to have to do with promoting our various e-resources and professional development electronic materials, as well as our online books that would be available from a professional development end and business support end, as well as doing some of our print materials that people may be interested in. So that is not showing in the C1, but that will be a new area that we will start to follow and will include in some of our other reports. So unless there were questions, that's really all that I was going to point out the change.
Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Just, we should probably switch the assemblies one to, in terms of timing, it says quarterly to spring and fall. This is OC 1.3.
Yes. So I will list that as spring, fall, and then I will also just make a note of that in the report next month that that's been done.
Thank you, Lori, for bringing that up. Okay.
You know me, try to be irritating.
Not irritating. We need somebody like you to keep me right.
We need somebody to nitpick.
No, don't ever say that.
No, I think it's a positive thing.
It depends.
He means we need the detail person.
Right.
Well, there are times for nitpicking and times for not.
The point of this entire report is to be able to keep us on task and to be able to report to ourselves, to the board, and to our community. So thank you for pointing those out, because sometimes I will miss one line here or there as things begin to change throughout the year.
Okay, we're still with you, Serena. Strat plan goals. You've done that? F2?
So our next one is we're going to get into the rest of the strategic planning pieces. And I'm just going to bring up the agenda so that it's a bit easier to follow. This will be new this month on the way that we're actually addressing these. And hopefully this will make it'll make it more functional for us to be able to not have the committee meetings this year, but to know what we have to be discussing. So this is a bit of a change from previous years. So we have our 4 strategic goals listed as 2 through 5, F2 through 5. And then we'll be identifying the various item that it is, whether it's on the action plan. In some cases, it comes from our annual, our bylaw, that's our annual agenda. And then what is the piece that we need to accomplish, whether it's a discussion or a decision or a report that needs to be received, or any actions will be in there. So for our first one, and then I'll turn it back over to the chair to continue on. Our first one is action item C.2, which is to identify key supporters and develop a communication plan with priority groups. Obviously, we're not going to have that decision made today, but what we do need to do to stay on track is to have a discussion on how we would like to do this, not who the members are, because obviously this would be a closed session discussion. But we're going to need at least one closed session meeting in the future, and we should be able to select a date for March or April that we would like to do that, and that way we can start to plan. And in that, we do have options with the March and April. We can, if we think this is going to be a larger piece, we can cancel our regular meeting. Our regular meetings used to be required 10 times a year. They're now required 7 times a year. So we have the ability, if we think that we're going to be spending maybe 2 or 3 hours on big topic discussions, to change that particular meeting from a regularly scheduled meeting to a special meeting on the certain topics we want to hit. They may be opened or closed, again, depending on the topics, or it may be something that is a short meeting that's closed or open that gets rolled into the larger meeting. So we have a lot of options there. And that's what we'll be seeing as we move through the next few pages on the agenda, is this type of discussion.
Yeah, Serena, a real strong reason for having a closed meeting. And the thing that crosses my mind, identifying key supporters. Well, then we're talking about people we know or know of, etc. That might be a reason for having a closed meeting.
Yes.
Is that right?
It definitely is, yes.
And but is your words developing a communication plan with any priority groups? That wouldn't necessarily have to be closed, would it? In your opinion?
I think that our initial piece is going to be looking at how our key supporters fit into both the communication and into the vibrant spaces piece. We had a lot of fundraising discussions. We had a lot of champions for library discussions that we had started in the previous year. And when 2020 sort of went in its direction that it did, we stopped having those discussions. So for at least this first meeting, I think we have a larger closed session where we are determining who and how we want to work with people. And then we would be able to move into future meetings that would be open where we're not talking about names, but more content and process.
Right. Does anyone else have any questions or thoughts on this subject? Joanne, Jesse, Laurie, Bob?
No?
At one point, and this came out of communications, yes, it did. We did have a brief discussion and wondered if it needed to be a facilitated session to help us think in advance of ideas and also just to run the meeting. And I don't know whether we have any money for that sort of thing this year.
We do.
What are your thoughts on that?
We did budget that in as part of our strategic planning and board budget.
Do we have any leads on who could facilitate that kind of session?
There are a few. I could bring that back to the board if we want to look at, depending on how in depth we're going to go on our early discussions. And that was one of the reasons why I was wondering if we wanted to first have the discussion as a closed session where we're looking at what our initial thinking is of who and how we want to do this so that we can frame what type of request we're putting out for quotes or tenders. It's hard to put it out until we know kind of where we want to be. Are we looking at a short 2-hour meeting of fundraising? Are we looking at a larger, that political campaign of library champion? So having the first discussion, I think, may be needed before we get into the deep brainstorming facilitated session that we need to have.
Was a new wrinkle I hadn't thought of. Laurie, you were saying like an outside facilitator?
Maybe, but maybe not. I'm just, Dorothy, do you remember having that discussion about wanting a facilitated session and anything we talked about in that meeting? I forget now.
No, I do remember that, Lori. And I was thinking it was an external facilitator. And it was more around fundraising and the political environment rather than an internal facilitator. That's my recollection. And
I have some notes here from an early discussion around, how do we start to identify individuals? And I'd written down things like former board members or council members, but sort of what would be the ideas that would stimulate our thinking around who might be an obvious supporter of the library, and also business groups that we work with or other service groups in the community that we provide good supports to. They would all be, in fact, recipients of the library service or particularly beneficiaries of the library service. And some of that information would come directly, I think, from Sabrina and the staff.
Well, the question just really occurs to me now, as it's wont to do. Do you mind my asking, why are we now identifying key supporters?
Joanne has her hand up, Morris. I don't know if you can see her.
No, I can't. No, sorry, sorry, Joanne. Go ahead.
Morris, I would like to come back to Sabrina's suggestion that we have a closed meeting, because I see us getting into the topics right now, and I want to pull us back to be better prepared. And perhaps Sabrina's suggestion of in lieu of the March meeting, we have a closed meeting to discuss this amongst ourselves and then come out with a clearer picture of what our needs are, internal or external facilitator, and specifically what we want from this facilitation.
Well, Joanne, thank you, Joanne. However, that wasn't the question I raised. I raised a very direct question. Why do we need key supporters today?
If I may, Mr. Chair, first of all, it's on our action plan, and not that is this reason to actually do something, but we decided to move forward with this because we knew both the fundraising needs for any expansion of buildings are going to be requiring both contributors and champions.
Right.
And then I think that the E3 correspondence is a #1 reason why we need to have champions who are going to continue to be people that are willing to stand up and say, library services as a non-for-profit are those which are currently under attack, not just from within the community, but globally. We do not make money for our municipalities, and therefore it's always seen as, is it something that should be lessened? How much tax dollars do we want to put into it? And we have a very strong system with a large group of supporters and many, many residents who have an expectation of service. So this type of discussion, not just about the financial contribution, which is a piece of our key supporters, which comes up in the Vibrant Spaces section, but as communication, people who are going to be our champions, people who are going to speak positively of us and be able to bring the message forward of the types of services that we provide are positive in what they expect. It's very easy for one or two voices to become loud against you. And we need to know that there are community members who feel just as strongly that want to speak and are positive. So that was the main reason to do it. And I think that we've seen how a budget process once again put us into the press as being a problem child for the town, when the reality is many ratepayers came forward and said, that's not my voice and I don't want that to be what moves forward.
Okay, I hear what you're saying, but you're bringing up what may have been one of the underlying reasons for this identification of key supporters, and that being fundraising. Now, I submit to you that this year and next year, and maybe I don't know when, we won't be doing much in the way of fundraising. That is my thought. Now, when you then in my mind, instead of supporters for fundraising, take that out of the picture. What you're really saying is you're looking, not you personally, Sabrina, but what you're thinking of is more like friends of the library who would step forward and answer those questions to those nitwits out there who, nitpick on the budget, for instance, that type of thing.
We do have two areas where we identify key supporters. So one is under Vibrant Spaces, which has to do with our capital campaign. And you're correct. That is a very separate conversation about fundraising, which we know we're not going deep into in 2021 because the pandemic continues. But the C2.3 is under communication, and that is 100% about communication. So that is about people who are going to be our champions. We weren't looking to have a Friends of the Library, which would be a separate board and separate organization, but really to have people who would be champions, who feel strongly and have been our regular supporters for time immemorial in the community. So C2.3 is only about the communication piece. It's not about the fundraising, but the committees, both previous communication and Vibrant Spaces, felt that when we had the single conversation, it would be worthy, since we're talking about a facilitator, to look at it a bit more broad stroke to know where various connections are in our community, so that we start to have a bit of a roadmap for what we need today and also what we need in the future. So don't pay for a facilitator twice.
Rob?
Thank you. And just to add to that, I think we do need those voices in the community that speak up for the library. Seeing the letters that came in, it was a great lift, I think, for everybody. And we need more of that. We need people to share when the library puts something on Facebook. We need as many people as possible to share that, to keep that positive notion out there. As well, we need to modernize people's concept of the library, because a lot of people think of a library and a museum as dusty old places where nobody goes anymore. And we know that's not true, but but there's still that notion in the community among a lot of, especially older people, that, well, nobody borrows books anymore, nobody reads anymore, they've all got computers, and they don't know what the library does nowadays. They don't know how important it is to our youth. They don't know how important the museum is in telling our local stories. And we saw a good example of that with these latest films with the military heritage. So the more we get people out there telling that and talking about it in the community, the more we push back against that lack of information or misinformation that causes these problems in the first place.
Anyone else comment?
Morris,
Yes, Jesse?
it seems to me that we do have access to a large group of people who, if not today, then tomorrow, and I'm thinking more about the midterm and long term, will be strong supporters of the library, both vocally and perhaps financially. Every day virtually, leaving aside the pandemic, every day virtually, the library is crowded with young children. And young children have young parents. And it's those, and they're easily identifiable by name, I think, because they all must have library cards or other means of identifying. It seems to me that we ought to attempt to assemble a list of the parents of these young students who come to the library on a daily basis, and to have that list available to us as potential supporters, not just friends of the library, but of supporters of the library, so to speak, just as if you were a politician who wanted to assemble a list of voters. These are people who, as they grow up, will realize the value of the library and will be supportive of it.
That's a good point. Joanne, do you have anything to say? Gary, Dorothy?
I'm just concerned about Boy Pop, if that's what it's still called, and compiling
About what? About what?
our access to this information. Is it not confidential? I threw you to Sabrina.
So the lists of our members are not something that would come to the board, which is why the board has to sit down and actually have conversations about who are community champions in the community that we should be speaking with. The staff can certainly bring some names forward as well, but it would not be a case of going through our 4,000, 5,000 membership list to try to find people who use the library. It's not the reason why we collect it, and we certainly couldn't use it for that purpose. But we do know that in our parents with children, there are 3 or 4 people who are very active socially, who would be a person that would be great to involve as a champion. So those types of things we can bring forward. Sorry, I'm trying to bring examples forward without without bringing anything that we can't speak of in open session. So I do think that it would be a longer discussion about people and businesses and sectors from the champion end, and thinking of fundraising, certainly, but understanding that fundraising is not about supporting the operational budget. That is the responsibility of the tax base through the town. What we do need to look at is how we continue to build our investments so that when we are prepared to do investments in our building for expansions or any other things, that we are prepared with the funds that council would expect for us. And although we don't anticipate having a campaign for funding this year, I do think that while we are looking at our key supporters from a political end, we do need to be looking very holistically at who has connections in various ways that will help us in all of the places that we know we want to go and achieve the strategic plan. So it is a larger discussion, even if the political end of communication is what we would be focusing on this year.
Before I step in again, Gary, you had to say? Dorothy?
Yes, I agree with Sabrina and what's been said. This is kind of like a necessary thing to do anyway, and it's kind of a pre-step to fundraising. You know, at some point in a growing community like ours, we're going to have to expand our facilities. So we might as well short term and get our supporters, and with an idea being that at some point in the future there's a bigger picture that we have to look at. But timing wise, what we're doing here makes sense to me.
Dorothy?
Yeah, I didn't catch all of what Gary said, but if the idea is that we now look to establish allies in the community for political reasons, defense of the budget, etc., that just sets the framework for down the road when we get back into fundraising mode. So I think it's important to lay the framework now so that we can be successful in a year or two.
Okay, thank you. If I may, you know, or I hope you would agree that I'm not necessarily negative on things, not generally negative. I try to be realistic on things. And what I'd like to suggest to you that item C2.3 in the action plan was based on the need for was circled around the idea of expansion and fundraising. I'll be very blunt with you. I think I'm right in saying that over the next 1, possibly 2 years, we can look at it, but we won't necessarily be looking at fundraising. Therefore, my question to you now is, this item, this action plan item C23, is looking for identifying key supporters. To support us in what? There is a phrase I'd like to throw out too, right now, and that is to let sleeping dogs lie. We have, other than that little foo-for-all with the Ratepayers Association, that was a nothing. Anyone in his right mind can figure that one out. But other than that, unless I'm wrong, there is nothing, there are no great things that we need support on today. That's my point of view. But unfortunately, by saying that, I'm also saying maybe the action plan item is not right to be there in that section. Does anyone violently disagree with me? Which is fine. That's the way it is. Oh, thank you, Laurie. I knew you would. I disagree.
Actually, I think this is absolutely the time that we need to be sure we know who our supporters are in the community, but also to be sure that we are serving everybody that we want to be serving and need to be serving. And so reaching out not just to people who we know are supporters and being able to identify them, because I think we have a kind of a bit of a picture, but getting that all together would be very useful. But it's also an opportunity to explore what needs might be out there that we could do a better job of serving. So I don't really have a good example of that, but some of the things that came up at the OLA conference, I think were kind of useful in this regard as well. But basically my comment is, this is absolutely the time when we have a bit of a pause to make sure we understand the directions we're going in, that we have people supporting us in those directions.
Okay, I'll buy that. Not a problem. It looks as if it's 5 or 6 to 1. I mean,
if I may add on to that, Morris,
well,
I think
please.
that the main issue with the premise that you put forward is that it's about fundraising, and it's not. It's about communication. So communication is one of the key strategies. We've acknowledged from the beginning that it was our weak point as an organization, as a board. And it is now time that we're halfway through our strategic plan and we're starting to look to the next strategic plan. So I think that this is not about capital campaign. This is about the political knowledge of who is out there exactly what Lori said, what are the needs, and really is the first step before we can start onto the strategic planning process of identifying what the next strat plan needs and desires are by the community. So one of the key complaints by some members of the community on the last strategic plan is they didn't know that we were doing a strategic plan. Now, we certainly promoted it everywhere from newspapers to websites. It was on the town's blitz. So knowing who these key supporters are also a piece that those are the library champions that start to go to people that they know and say, have you participated in this survey? Have you participated in the town hall that they're doing? We know that it's the same people around the table who always want to come and hear what we have to say. But if those people were involved in bringing others or sharing that information as well, maybe we would have a stronger support in the community for the strategic plan that's designed at the end of 2022. So I do think that this is, capital campaign aside, this is about communication, and it's a goal that we spent quite some time talking about in 2020 as we developed the as we developed the action plan. So we should be looking at the due diligence that was done moving into November on the action plan as we're moving forward through 21 and not wanting to keep going back and change things.
I feel my knuckles have just been properly wrapped, but it's now 7-1. I'll take it back. I'll reserve my own judgment now, but I will bring this discussion to a close. Will someone please make a motion whether or not to have a meeting, what sort of meeting in March or April? Rob, would you like to care to make a motion?
I'll make a motion and I'll let Sabrina wordsmith it, but should we change the focus, make sure the focus is clear of what we're doing and that it's not
It's
for
up to you
fundraising?
it's up to you when you make the motion.
I would want that in the motion, that the focus of this is communications.
Right. C2.3 is about the communication plan.
That's how I read it,
Yes.
but I think Morris sees it differently. So I think we should be sure that it's clear that that's what this is about. Is we're looking for the raving fans who will find other raving fans. That's what we used to call it in sales.
I did ask you to make a motion, or you offered to make a motion, didn't you?
And
Yeah.
at this point, what we may want to do is actually go through all of the discussions, because we may find that that might be the only thing that we need a special meeting in March or April, and we don't need to cancel our meeting to have like a 4-hour meeting if we think it's going to be part of a closed session as part of the regular meeting. So we may want to go through all of them, and I can just identify the various ones we're going to come back to, if that's easier.
Okay. I was going to put a motion forward, but if you prefer to do it your way, that's fine with me too.
You kind of
It's up to
lost
the
me
chair.
here. Are we going through all these other items?
All of these items are on our agenda for today, yes.
Oh, I know that, but I mean, are we going to discuss all of those and then come back to this?
We may just find that there are 4 things at the end that we want to talk about in April or May, and at that point decide what those meetings will look like based on what we think we need to talk about at those next meetings.
Well, could we not simplify things by just saying we will devote the March 21st or March, whatever date it is, or the April meeting to the discussion of C 2.3?
Certainly.
I would be happy to do that. Yeah, I think that is simplifying it,
That's my job.
and you're good at it.
Hope you're all smiling.
So I have Rob as a mover.
All right, can I, what was that motion again then?
I forget.
That we defer either the March or April meeting and hold a special meeting, which would be closed, to identify key supporters and develop a communication plan with priority groups.
Seconder? Lori? All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's the majority. It's carried. Okay, so we may come back in due course, but whatever. We've got a date, have we? Okay,
At this point, it's the March or April.
yeah. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item number 2. Action item C 2.4. Provide updates to council through committee of the whole meetings. What was, same thing, Sabrina, you have to kind of lead me on this one because, we'll go ahead.
Again, we have the item that we're going to do this on a quarterly basis. So for me to get onto the committee of the whole, I'm just wondering if there is any Q1 or Q2 topics that you would like us to focus on. We certainly have some good news stories that we can bring forward to council, such as our films. And if you wanted to do something that was more in depth as a discussion type piece, then we could do that as well. So just if you had any topics that you would like to look at for the next meeting. I can bring it forward as an administrative update to council, but I didn't know if the board had something specific that you wanted to.
Could
touch
I,
on.
Mr. Chair, could I suggest that the administrative update would be great, but also maybe just the trailer for the 2 films, just as a way of getting more awareness, because a lot of people do watch council meetings, so it would make them all aware of them as well, as part of the way of telling our story.
Laurie?
I was thinking about taking a topic at each quarter to point out things that the library does and decide what might be the main topic each time. Rob, you suggested the real history stuff, which is great. What I'd written down as an example was around internet access. You know, the library provides technology support like hotspots and Chromebooks and Wired Wednesdays and software like lynda.com. And it also, you know, offers sort of technology skills as well as the hardware and software. And that's really important in an area where there's kind of spotty internet access in different spots, or the support that we provide to the migrant workers, because that's the way they, you know, get to send email home and things like that. So like pick a topic like that that maybe, I mean, I think there's an internet initiative going on in the area that would be on council's mind. So, you know, we can take a topic that it's on their minds anyway and show them what we're already doing in the library, or even pick a topic where it may be new to us and talk to the council about what we could do to support an initiative that they're undertaking.
If I could, the internet one would be a good one. I chair that task force and we are hot on the topic right now. We just had a meeting last night. So a public information center. So that would be good to do that sometime in the next, either this quarter or next.
Let me ask a question. Maybe I'll direct it to Rob if I may. Put your deputy mayor's hat on, Rob. At your council meetings, you do get copies of our minutes, don't you?
Yes. So we're up to date on that, but I still think for the public's benefit, but also for some of the councilors to hear directly from Sabrina and see some of the things would be helpful as much to us as to council.
And do council members read our key messages
Yes.
in detail,
Yes.
or do they?
Well, they're supposed to. I certainly do. I mean, we get sometimes 400 or 500 pages of stuff to read for a meeting. So,
I understand.
but it is part of the job. So you're supposed to do it.
Has anyone ever mentioned any of the key messages we published?
I can't say that I can recall anything in specific, but they wouldn't necessarily go into that much detail. They would ask me a question about it or ask Sabrina. So knowing that Sabrina is coming would be another good reason for them to take a little more time on the key messages.
Does everyone agree with that?
Mhm.
Dorothy? Sorry, Dorothy.
I do. I really like Lori's idea of tying in the technology available through the library to what the town is looking at right now. I think that's a brilliant idea.
Fine. What is the question in here, Sabrina?
I think that we've resolved that the next topic we can do would be a general admin update with the trailers of the films, and then the key topic that we touch on for that particular quarter, we could look at the technology. There is a future funding announcement that was just made 2 weeks ago for 4.8 million in infrastructure for broadband, and I know that's something that the town has been working on. And I've already shared some ways that we might be able to support having that library specific funding come into the town to support the outer regions receipt of broadband. So those types of things I can bring forward.
Okay, everyone happy with that? Anything else? No?
And that's something that I'll keep bringing forward for other topics as well.
Good. Lori, Lori, you have something to say?
Well, only to ask, is this something that both board and staff would participate in these presentations? I mean, I know there's some will be purely admin, but I think probably there's a role for the board in being visible with council.
I agree.
Okay.
So I guess the process is that you ask for a spot on an agenda with on the committee of whole agenda, and then I guess let us know and we figure out how to work with the material.
Yes.
Okay. All right, next item, Sabrina, you're still there.
So the next item is just an update. It was C25, which is that the CEO and the CAO will be meeting quarterly. And I just wanted to make an update that we have once again set our meetings for the year. Sean and I, it's something that we've been doing since I began in 2017. So it is an ongoing aspect for us. So just an update.
Good, thank you. We can move on if we may. Tell me about item number 4. Tell us, not me.
Again, so just an update so that you're aware, this has been a piece that we've been looking at, and we did not receive a junior communication staff full-time that we had looked at last year. We did move forward with having a library assistant who is doing some of those tasks. So now that we're moving forward into the next budget, we are putting a portion of our hours into doing this and other communication tasks. So we do anticipate having a better market-ready collection of images. We did produce quite a number of images in preparation of the strategic plan in 2018. And what we found at that point was we didn't have a good collection of images of participants at programs and events. We didn't have authorization to use them in publications. Very typical at programs, someone snaps off a picture and then you don't have the information that you need to use it. So we have been working to improve that now. So just an update on that one, that is in progress.
But you do have a question there, don't you? That did any of the board have requests for images that we should be
Yes.
looking at?
So if the board has anything that you would like us to start to think of, we found in the strategic plan of 2018, the theme of our apple orchard was something that was requested to be used on our promotional material so that we weren't just looking at books or children or seniors, that we looked much more about our town. And what we found is at the time that we did that, we had one season only that we could touch because we didn't have a year. So for example, if you wanted images of our community and you want something that's seasonality wise, and we know next year at this time, we're going to be in the process of writing this strategic plan, now is the time to say we would like to start seeing images of, so that we can start to get these throughout the 1-year process, so that when we are here next year, it's not a case of too bad, had we thought of something we could have gotten a winter shot of.
Sabrina, I live on a snowmobile trail. I don't snowmobile, but there are a lot of people that do. And I don't think that's really been focused on. And, you know, I see the farmers out pruning the trees in February. On snowmobiles.
It all comes full circle.
Sabrina, write that down, snowmobiles. Joanne on a snowmobile.
No.
But if you think of anything else that you would like to start to see outside of our library glam type ideas, we did find we had a very strong connection with the town and the community in our strategic plan by not focusing on inside the building shots throughout our entire strategic plan. Because it isn't just about Ellie Shore or Craigleith Heritage Depot, it's about the people, where they use us, whenever they use us across the town of the Blue Mountains. So we want to make sure that we have those types of images. And certainly you can always, it doesn't have to come through the board. If you have an idea or you see something that, you know, sort of pops out, let us know and we'll get out there and get some good images.
I just
Have
wonder
a
if the,
voluntold for that.
Sorry, Rob.
the key, wonder if the key messages could be a place you could look for some ideas that might provide ideas for pictures. Being an old newspaper guy, that's what we would have done.
That's a great idea.
Get a shot of somebody who's borrowed snowshoes from the library, snowshoeing along the Georgian Trail. That's perfectly kept this year for that type of thing.
A whole family of them.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on for me. The 2020 annual report.
So the annual report is something that we have done through committee in the past. So what I would like to know is from this board, how would you like to move forward on this? So we're going to be doing our statistics between now and the March meeting. So we should be able to start drafting pieces. In the past, the committee actually wrote what they wanted to see as an outline in the annual report. I then filled in the materials, brought it back to the committee. The committee then looked at that. We then talked about what types of branding and imagery we wanted to put forward to show us in, again, a different and growing light. And then it came to the board for a final approval of the text, and then it was released. So this is, again, a bit different since we're going to be doing this as a whole board. And I just wanted to know if there was any thought on how you would like to do this and at what point you wanted me to bring it back. If we're doing it monthly as a board meeting, we would probably, if we followed the same outline, we'll have it published by next year. So if you would like to do it a bit differently and you just want us to draft this and bring it back, we can do that. Or if the board wants to have an early discussion in March on how you want this to be presented, just so we have some direction.
Well, as usual, Sabrina's looking for suggestions from us. Does anyone have any suggestions? My thought, Sabrina, would be, if assuming no time problem, no time constraints, if maybe for the next meeting, I'll say the March meeting, if you could bring back a broad slash look at what you want. We'll pull it apart. I'll guarantee it'll probably stimulate a heck of a lot more ideas than we have right now. Wouldn't you agree?
Okay.
Everyone happy with that?
Can I ask a
Yes.
question?
Yes, Roy.
We've done a kind of a traditional annual report in the sense that, you know, a bit of a description of what we've done for the year. Is there any, I'm just wondering how well read it is, because it tends to be, frankly, they're always a bit dry. And one of the important pieces is that people need to have access to the financials, which could show up on the website anyway. So how comprehensive does a written document have to be? And is there an opportunity to do something a little more creative, like a video that shows some of the ways we have pivoted our services this year, and snippets from the curbside pickup, but also the electronic books, or programming. We used to have people together, and now we're showing Wired Wednesdays on or children's programming digitally, and then it becomes something that's an easy annual report, easy to look at. Click on, and you have almost an infomercial of stuff about the library that's not that long, doesn't require a lot of reading, and is available really virtually, because that's the way we're living right now. And
I'll tell you that our Facebook and YouTube videos have been getting hundreds of views, even board meetings, compared to print documents, which do not. So I would agree that if you would like to make a different take on our year in review, we can do something that is a short video that's released on our various platforms, and we would probably have several hundred people at least looking at it and watching through.
Anyone else?
Joanne has
Has a comment.
Through Morris to Sabrina.
Yeah, go on.
Through Morris to Sabrina. Ah.
Yeah, we hear you.
Oh,
we hear
okay.
you.
Good. My question is, do you in fact have the staff to pull this together? It seems quite large.
Yes, we are becoming quite adept at doing our virtual programming and doing our virtual story times, and really would be the same kind of piece. So we could do that, and we have a fantastic voluntold videographer who does work out of the love of his library and spouse.
Well, really impressed, and thank all these crew members.
We have many volunteers, so yes, we will be able to pull something like that off.
Wow.
I think it's a great idea to do a video like that, and especially showing how we had to change and pivot quickly, and showing scenes with the masks and the pickup and the kids out underneath the front lawn, socially distanced and all that for the kids programs in the summer. I think those are things we need to keep a permanent record of, and to put it in a video, I think makes good sense. You also have to cover off, obviously, the financials on a small report, but I'd say it's worth a try.
And in the last year, we actually didn't put the financials into the year in review. We linked them because our year in review came out in April, and our audit doesn't come out until June or July. So what we did is we said, stay tuned for the audit, and we linked that when it came out to the document. So we could do the same thing when the audit is released as well. And then you actually don't have to provide the major overview of the audit. It's there for people to look at, and we focus on our program services and general budget.
Okay. All right, are we okay to move on to the next item? Good. Consultation process for the next strategic plan. What is your thinking there, Sabrina?
So this is something that we say that we're going to have achieved beginning in September. I do think that this is something that could be tied into the discussion that we have at our special meeting on C23 about our key supporters from a communication end, because I do think it's going to be a lot of the same kind of discussions of who's out there from our various key service groups. What is it that we need to know? What don't we know? And who should we start to talk with? So I do think that the C4-3 conversation could be merged in with the C2-3 and start to look at that as a similar discussion before we have to move into consultation.
So you'll be happy then if we have that, I'll call it the C23 meeting in March or April, we'll discuss this. So
Yes.
everyone happy with discussing this at that time? I
Yes.
see nods all around the place. Okay, moving on to number 7, Sabrina.
So this one is having to do with resolution that we passed that I will be bringing forward the updates on our various meetings while we are in a virtual Zoom board meeting style. I did put into one of the reports what the numbers were as of last week when we released. The January board meeting has not had any more traction since last week. So there are 19 views on YouTube and 113 views on Facebook, and that's as of this morning. However, our November and September actually have increased since last week. So some people went back and started watching again, maybe just found out that they were there. But we're up to 12 views on YouTube, which went up, and 120 views on Facebook for November. And September, if you remember, we only had the YouTube, we didn't have Facebook, and that's increased to 26 views. So we do have people watching us, and many are watching for most of, if not all, of the meeting. So they're not just popping in for a quick second and then leaving. So we do have many more people, obviously, who are attending our board meetings virtually than we have ever had in person. So this is a fantastic option at this point. And then just keeping in mind that per the resolution, it will only happen while our board is doing these types of meetings because we don't have the ability to live stream otherwise. So it's only because we are not face to face in the boardroom or in the gallery doing our meetings.
Good, thank you.
So just an update there.
Thank you. Okay, just at this stage, I've written down a question for all of you, actually. How do you like this, the way that Sabrina has set up this particular section, covering the pertinent items and dates from the action plan? Have you any thoughts or changes you'd like to see?
I found it easier to follow.
Anyone else?
It was good.
Okay. There you are, Sabrina. We've conquered that one all right.
It's a lot of work with 82 action items,
I know.
19 objectives, 4 goals to make sure that we keep everything moving forward. Especially it's different as we're doing virtual meetings and even being face to face. So as long as everybody can track it and it makes sense to the board, then hopefully that will keep us all moving forward.
Okay. Thank you. We'll move on to item number F3. Where did I put that? We have a full complement of board members. So this is a fairly minor change, isn't it? Sabrina, would you just fill in the way? Well, hang on. This is in connection with policy bylaw number 2018-99. It's the way it's set up. It needs to be changed because of what we're doing right now. That's correct?
Yes.
And the way you've got it, Sabrina, sorry, I'm lost in my piece of paper here. Yeah, does everyone look at, can you just flip up to show the changes to items F and G? Yeah, do you see all these lines here? Really, it's just to standardize the format for the agenda. That's basically what it is. And I'm happy enough with what Sabrina has suggested, although I had made a slightly different suggestion. Because if we ever go back to committees again, which is probably quite likely that we will at some point in time, or if not this board, then the next board, we really should today include a section for committee reports over and above what Sabrina suggested. And that's all I'm saying. Other than that, I'm happy with it. Does anyone else have any other thoughts on it?
I always do, Morris.
I'm sorry, Glory.
It's me. I always have thoughts on these things.
Well, I'm counting on you to have them.
Good. Well, I frankly would just leave the names you've got here under the new F, communications. I would leave it as communications and strat planning. I would leave organizational capacity, bylaws and governance, vibrant spaces and capital campaign. So it can be either done as committees, reports coming from committees, or it's discussions of those items that show up for the full board agenda.
Okay.
So it kind of covers both bases. And you still have a G, other business, which could be other reports, other business, doesn't really matter. And that's where if there's something other goes, obviously.
I heard your point. Yeah. Anyone else have any other comments? Well, would anyone care to make the motion, to make a motion that this board approve the amendments as suggested to this policy number bylaw BLG 2018-99?
So procedurally, we do need to have the first motion unanimously waiving the notice to change the bylaw.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, because even though we've got the full people here, sorry.
Yes,
Sabrina.
we do have to waive it. Yes.
Bye. Would someone care to make a motion that this board unanimously accepts the waiving of notion to change the bylaw as per bylaw number 2018-1-2?
Joanne?
And seconder,
Dorothy?
Dorothy. All in favor? That's carried. Now, the other motion that they approve the amendments as suggested in the report. Does someone care to make that motion? Laurie?
With the
Sorry.
amendment,
I thought you put your hand
I
up.
was suggesting, I would move it with the amendment I was suggesting. Which was,
I missed that. What was that?
I would move it with the amendment I was suggesting.
Could you state it, please?
So that it says communications and strategic planning, organizational capacity, bylaws and governance, vibrant spaces and capital campaign.
Well, that's the motion. Anyone, is there a seconder to that motion?
I would second that.
Gary seconds that. Before we come to the motion, I would comment, Laurie, that you are, by that motion, you are saying that we will always have those 4 headlines or five headlines for our strategic plan. You're locking us in. I don't think we should be locking people in.
Well, it already follows our strategic plan. And we would then amend this another period if we have different goals in a different strategic plan.
C for campaign.
I'm sorry?
C for campaign.
Thank you.
Something wrong with the acoustics here. Maybe it's my ears. Anyway, all I'm pointing out is I don't like to see bylaws set up and cast in stone, whereas they could be set up to encompass things for future boards without those limitations.
This
However,
one is a bit different, Mr. Chair, given that it is our agenda and annual agenda. So I do see that we would probably have some changes to this from time to time as some changes happen, and I would think that certainly as a new strategic plan comes out every 4 years, we will probably have this section altered slightly.
All I'm saying is, if you took out the details of item F and just left it as strategic plan update and action items, that'll cover a multitude of sins for this board and future boards. Future boards, you're pinning them down to having items in those particular subheadings. But don't listen to me, it's okay. We have a motion on the floor. And it's duly seconded. All in favor? Laurie? I can't see the whole screen. I'm sorry, Sabrina.
Sorry.
I see 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That motion is carried. Okay, we've done the amendments. Are we okay with that now, Sabrina? Keep me right, would you?
Yes, so that just puts us now that we are working within the bylaw of our agenda.
In the topic of nitpicking, there's a couple more pages to that particular bylaw that looks like this and this, which is a monthly description.
Yes.
And it still refers to trustee councils. That should probably just be changed to OLS board assemblies. And I don't know whether you wish to approve the annual report, which is listed as a February item, to a time of year that we tend to do it.
So we did approve it in February last year. We approved the text, and then it was released once the graphics were completed in end of March. If we'd like to push that back, I think that it could be something that is regularly approved in March and definitely by April, now that we no longer wait for our audit to release it. It used to be done in June and July, and we were waiting for the audit, but we haven't done that the past 2 years.
It makes sense to me to move it. Well, we discussed it today, so maybe we're approving it in March or April, I'm not sure. And then as you can see in March, the first bullet has to do with the trustee council attendee. So we're not doing that any longer. Actually, that can just be gone, because it's not so much the attendee, because the attendee now will be Joanne, who's been appointed.
Yes.
So and that
Which
would
happen again in the fall.
Yeah, September.
Okay.
All right, are all those little changes okay to be made like that? Do we need a motion to, a resolution to approve these changes, Sabrina? I don't think we do.
If we're comfortable, since the last one was about doing it, if the mover and seconder are comfortable that that includes all of the amendments that we've made.
Are you comfortable with that, Laurie?
Fine with me, yep.
Seconder, who seconded that? No, who was it?
Gary.
That's me. I'm comfortable
Gary?
with that. Yeah.
Okay, you can make those changes, Sabrina?
Yes.
Already made it, okay. All right.
So the next item on the agenda, Mr. Chair, is from that particular document. Annually, we approve the board schedule and times. So before I publish for the rest of 2021, I just wanted to make sure that the board has agreed to stick with the same times, and if not, that we have that discussion now.
board meeting schedules. I thought we approved that last meeting, didn't we?
No.
We didn't. Could you
So
fill
at
us
this
in?
point, we are the third Thursday of the month at 2 p.m. For up to 10 meetings a year, and we do not meet in December and one of the summer months.
Yeah, and wasn't that sufficient?
We've done it every year in January or February to confirm that that's what we're going to be doing.
Well, that's my point. I thought we did that in January. We mutually agreed on a Thursday at 2 o'clock, and we agreed on 7 meetings, and with the December and one of the two summer months. However, if you say we need another motion then to do something?
I did not have that down as a resolution that it was noted.
I'll move.
Do you mind telling me
Yes,
what you're moving?
Well, as printed, that this board approves the 2021 regular meeting schedule as third Thursday of each month at 2 o'clock, with the exception of December and either July or August. Is that pretty much the wording, Sabrina? Okay,
Is there a seconder to that?
Second.
Laurie or Dorothy? Yeah. All in favor? That's carried. Okay. Members will share information from the event from the OLA boot camp. Anyone care to share what they found out from this conference? Laurie?
I can, but I don't need to go first if someone else, 'cause I feel like I'm doing a lot of talking. But I don't see anybody else jumping in. So I actually ended up attending 6 sessions at the conference, and I tried to focus on sessions related to integrating the library into the community. I didn't focus purely at a board level. I was looking at other things as well, which I thought was quite interesting. I won't talk about all the sessions I went to. I'll just pick out the ones I thought were important. I went to one called Recognizing Library Value, Supporting the Community and Economic Recovery. And it was actually about a project Huron County did with the Economic Development Department of the county. And some of the key messages from that was that they were able to do this particular project, which was developing an asset map using something called BizMap to show all the various services and community groups that are operating throughout the county. And the important thing they said was that, for one thing, the municipal staff and the library staff management were very well acquainted with each other, having done other projects in the past. And so it became a natural relationship to have. And that the economic development crowd brought a completely different set of strengths than the library crowd did. And they certainly appreciated how each of them was able to contribute to the project, and how the library could contribute to the goals of the municipality in ways they hadn't really understood the library could do. And as I was listening to this, I was thinking about, well, some of the things we talked about today, the communications, the 2.4, 2.5, and I won't bother figuring out what those are, but we talked about each of those just now. So I thought that was a very important corollary to things that we're dealing with. Another session was called Collaborate Now, How Public Libraries Can Lead in Supporting Community Information and Providing Collaboration Opportunities. And this was something that Hamilton Public Library did. They ended up assuming responsibility for the information and referral function that had been done by a separate nonprofit for a number of years. And they had something they called the Red Book, which was a website of human services in the community, nonprofit, charitable, and government. And so the library actually assumed responsibility and then continued to build this information and referral. They are now the source of the data for the community to 211, which is the government service for community information. And for smaller groups, they actually provide the web presence and information for these smaller partners that were unable to do that themselves or have the technical ability. And then they went on to create what they call the Brown Bag Lunch Network, where they monthly would get these groups together to network and share problems and solutions. And they found it became quite a tangible benefit for nonprofits and enhanced their partnerships and also leveraged other opportunities for cooperation. Made me wonder if what kind of INR, information referral service, we have in this community and what kind of role the library may play in that. So that was another one. There was a session called Leave No One Behind, Ensuring Representation and Accessibility on Your Board. And it talked about barriers to inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility, and 5 factors that contribute to people being left behind. And they're offering a couple of sessions. This is at OLBA, Ontario Library Boards Association, a couple of webinars coming up on this topic. We talked about libraries need to seek input from diverse groups like LGBTQ, visible minorities, disabled, low-income groups, so that the library is responsive to those different needs. And there's a session being held March 25th, a webinar for an hour, talking about that topic, the root causes. And another one about exploring ways to reach out to those groups and empower them in terms of library services and maybe possibly library governance. And that one's on April 8th. It's another webinar, from 3:30 to 5. They also talked, I heard about this twice in 2 different sessions, something called using the Harwood Institute's Library Transforming Communities. Seems to be something that the American Library Association sponsored. It was actually assisting libraries to implement this system. And there's a number of tools that they've provided to help libraries do that. And it assists you in having structured conversations with various demographic groups. And that struck me as something that we actually want to try to have in terms of our next strategic planning process. So those were the key items that came up. There was another one I watched, which was called What's Keeping Your CFO Up at Night, which I thought was kind of interesting. A very different relationship with the municipality than we have. Their CFO was actually, Kitchener Public Library was a staff member on the Kitchener staff, whereas really, in a sense, our CFO is partly Sabrina, but partly, sorry, I forget her name, at the town, because they shared different aspects of it. But really, at this particular session, it was kind of the equivalent of the town person speaking. Anyway, a couple of things that I thought were interesting is that they suggested that in your board orientation, you should include a review of the audited statements, the current budget, and also reserve fund. So there was a good understanding of the entire financial picture of the library when you first come on the board. And I don't think we did that, actually. And then also talked about knowing what your reserve funds are, what restrictions are on the reserve funds. So they don't seem like they're just spare cash that you can use for something, that they were put in place for longer term specific purposes towards which the board is actively working. So make sure you have a clear understanding of that. Really, there was a couple of other sessions, but those were some of the key messages that I picked up from that.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Well done, Lori.
Thank you, Jesse.
Yes.
All of the sessions are still available and will be until August. The board does have a login, so if anybody would like to do any of the sessions, just let me know and I can provide you with the credentials. And then a few of you who said you were interested received an email with your own login and credentials, but I do have one that is available for other board members as well.
And just this morning, I opened up, the organizers were asking for, to respond to a survey. And I haven't done it yet, but I read the questions and my only thought was very much directed to staff, to operating people as opposed to board members. Just a comment. Anything else on that particular section?
I'm wondering if we should ask someone to attend a couple of those sessions, the two OLA webinars on Leave No One Behind, if there's anybody interested in doing. They're each about an hour, and one March 25th and one April 8th.
Yeah, I'd be interested in the March 25th.
You're speaking to Sabrina at this point, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly. I didn't think about how to actually do it, but yeah, so I guess you'd have to look into, Sabrina, how one actually signs up for that. I think
Yes.
that would be kind of hand in glove. If you can do the April 8th too, Dorothy, I think that would be great.
Yeah, if I can, I certainly will. I'll need to check my work schedule.
Okay.
Great.
All right. Anything else in that, or can we move on? Yes,
Can I
Rory?
just ask if Sabrina, if you're aware of this Harwood Institute piece at
I'm
all?
not. I did do that one as well, and that's something that I wanted to look at for our strat planning. See if that's something that would come out before our September starting to plan.
Great. And if you want any notes, I wrote up some of this stuff. Let me know.
Okay, you can send those over if you want.
Okey-doke.
Okay. Moving on to discussion about quarterly meetings between, on our side, the chair, vice chair, and CEO, with the mayor, deputy mayor, and CAO. And hopefully all of you received my email of February the 12th asking you to tell me what you think we should take to that meeting. So what I'd like to do is maybe hear from everyone, maybe Sabrina, if you could just make a note of the topic.
Certainly.
And then we'll discuss them afterwards. But please just give us the topic and don't try and discuss it at that time. Just say, I want to talk about the hockey game, this type of thing. That's it. Don't discuss it at that time. We'll discuss it later on. Anyone like to come forward with any suggestions or what we should be talking to the mayor about and the deputy mayor?
How you can help with the broadband situation would be a good one.
How to help with the broadband situation. Okay. Joanne?
It's a naive question. Any plans for in the short term or long term for the two adjacent properties to the library?
Okay, you got a note of that, Sabrina? Yeah. Anything else?
Long-term plan,
Just a sec. Jesse,
long-term plans for Craigleaf.
you mean the depot?
Yes.
Okay. Are you there again, Joanne?
No.
Sorry.
Dorothy.
Anyone else?
Dorothy?
Dorothy?
Yeah, how we could become more visible, more at the forefront of the leisure activities plan.
Are we as the library board?
We as the GLAM. Yes,
Well, where we represent the glam, I guess, in a way.
Yes.
yeah.
Whatever, okay. Any other subjects? How many is that, Sabrina?
4.
I will add one. And let me preface my thing by saying I spent a lot of time thinking about this. And for the life of me, I had a problem coming up with a subject I'd like to talk to or us talking to the mayor today. And I'm going to go out on a limb and again preface it by saying, I'm always been a strong supporter of the independence of the library board under the PLA, independent from town council. But this time, my suggestion, Sabrina, and put this down, is three of us talk to three of them and say, give us your advice. What should we do with the $100,000 we have in reserve funds? I said no comment, Joanne.
No, that was just a grimace.
Oh, I see. Okay, Grims. Any other thoughts of things we should talk about?
Well, can I just comment on what you just said, Morris?
Is it? No, you can't. Not until I call the thing. Hang on. Do you have any other suggestions of the subject we should talk to the mayor about?
Well, it follows from what you said.
Is it different from what I said?
Yes.
Okay, what is it?
I'd like to get some sense of the view of the council in terms of where the library stands in their list of priorities. That's a big question, but council is saddled with huge problems at the moment.
No discussion at this point. We'll discuss them when I call the order. We got 6 at this point, Sabrina? I believe we have 6.
We do. I have one that I would like to add if the rest of the board members.
Yeah, no problem. You're
I would like to have a conversation about how we move forward with a allocated budget based on assessment rates. And if that's
Okay.
going to happen.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Mine is similar to Jesse's, but maybe a different point of view to it, but similar. The town is doing so much.
No, just what is this? What is the question?
Okay, I'd like to know more about all of the various plans they have being developed, because there's so many aspects. Of course, the leisure plan is a biggie for us.
No. What exactly you're after?
Feedback from them on how their planning is going, because I don't think we can get on to their agenda until they've done their leisure plan and all their other plans. But I guess my question is, how do we tie into or how can we tie into the hub concept they've been talking about?
How can we, as a library, tie into the hub concept?
Right, as it ties into all of their other planning.
Okay.
Because there's an awful lot of plans they've got on the going.
Okay, that seems to be 8. It's not bad. 8 subjects. Anyone else? Okay, we'll take these in the order I call them. Number 3 first. What is it, Sabrina?
Long-term plans for the depot.
Okay, that's a good. Everyone happy with that? Long-term. What are their long-term plans for the depot?
And I would preface the board, since we're in discussion now, that we should bring questions that we are prepared for answers.
How do you mean prepared for answers?
If we bring up some questions, we might not be prepared for answers that are given, because we then bring up questions that people haven't thought of. So at this point, there are no plans for ending the depot. It is our museum. It's under the museum or under the library's purview. I I think that there are questions that we have to be aware of, that we have to be looking for answers if we're going to go there.
Okay,
Well,
all right.
can I add something to that discussion?
Oh, Jesse, yes. of
Uh,
course.
When I'm thinking of the long-term plan for the depot, I'm also thinking of the study which came to our attention, what, 12, 18 months ago, about the demographics of Craigleith. And the thought which crossed my mind is whether there is any consideration to an expansion of the depot into a more full-fledged library.
Okay, sure. All right. Rob?
That actually ties into the question about the community hubs. So that is a good one. And so I think if we tie it into, what are we talking about for a hub for Craigleith, and will that include the depot? I think that would be a good way to phrase that. I also think that it would be a good thing for us to be proactive and say what we think the long-term plans for the depot should be. So
It
I
is a
don't think it would
discussion.
hurt. Yeah, I don't think it would hurt to say that.
Oh,
But this
that's
is
all
what we want.
Yeah. Okay, how about number 6?
Number 6 is a sense of view of council and where we stand as a library and their priorities.
You mean how we rank against the police services board, the fire station?
That's the way I took the statement that was made, but the person who made it may want to elaborate.
I didn't ask it or suggest it in that context. I don't care whether we are number 3 or number 33. What I want to know is whether the council sees the library as an entity which merits increasing the budget and expanding the use of it, both physically and in terms of the availability to the public. And if so, what's the timeline that the council might consider?
Okay. I do think that these questions, when we finally sort of narrow them down or tune them up, they'll have to be a little bit more precise because we got some overlaps, which we'll see. How about
That's
number
what
2?
we have a CEO for.
How about number 2, Sabrina?
What are the plans for the adjacent properties?
Adjacent to the library, yes.
Yes.
That's a fair question. We could say, Mr. Mayor, what are the council plans for them? And they'll give us an answer. Won't they, Rob? I mean, you're. Okay.
Oops, had my mic off. The answer is that there is no answer yet because it may tie into the school, and that's why that community hub question is the overarching one,
Okay.
because
All right. Okay.
how we deal with that is going to be the answer.
Okay. How about number 1, Sabrina?
How we can help with broadband.
We asked the mayor and the deputy mayor, how can we as a library help? That's a fair question. Anyone, any thoughts on that one?
If I could just explain my point, the idea is that we are looking at the whole issue of broadband access in the town, and we have about 9 companies that have shown an interest in being partners with us in one way or another. Where does the library fit into that picture would be a really valid question. And I would love to see us take a prominent place in that question, because I think it would serve us well in the long run.
See, Rob, I guess you're wearing 2 hats, aren't you?
I am, but I can see some value for the library in that discussion.
And the
see,
grant
by the
money,
way, by the way, Sabrina's smiling. I think she sees that too.
The grant money that was announced is specifically for libraries, and there are ways that we can partner deeper with the town. to try to have some of that funding accessible by the town and by the library to expand into the rural areas. So that is something that we definitely can work with and see once the actual grant information is released. We don't know what the specifics will be, if we can be a strong partner on that.
Okay. What items have we not discussed, Sabrina?
How to become more visible, specifically with the leisure activity plan. We have not touched on the reserve fund. We have not touched on the finance.
I'm sorry, what finance? What was that?
The finance question that the mayor and councilors in the budget said that they would like to move forward with the library being tied directly to an assessment rate so that we're not presenting our budget in the same way. We have a set amount that we would receive based on where our assessments are in the community.
Okay, let's take that one about the reserve funds. That was mine. Does anyone agree with me that we should perhaps ask the mayor? When I say the mayor, I do mean the deputy and the CAO as well, but I'll say the mayor.
Yeah, just that's taken. So, but thank you for mentioning it, but I take it that way, yeah.
Can I just add a comment that you didn't want me to do at the time, Morris? You voiced the point of view with which I agree, that it's very important for the board to maintain its perception and sense of independence from the council. That being said, it's extremely difficult to maintain that when the board is tied hand in glove to the council's money and cannot function without the council's money. So it seems to me that we have to consider whether tying the budget to the mill rate, to the level of real estate taxes, is simply tying those two bodies together, the council and the board, more closely, or whether in the alternative, the budget of the library board ought to be considered totally independently of the budget for the town at large.
I hear what you're saying, yes. Let me just elaborate a little bit, and I've maybe said this before. Those funds, I'll say $100,000 is a little more, doesn't matter. They're specifically earmarked for library expansion. Now, if we go into expansion, be it, when I say library, I'm also including the heritage, the depot. We're not going to be talking about expansion of $100,000.
No, 10 times.
We're going to be talking a heck of a lot more money than that. We're going to be talking about $1 million.
Correct.
I don't care what the number is, but certainly a lot more than 100. So why are we sitting on $100,000? And don't get into all the technicalities that we have to contribute so much. Why not just give it to the town and say, look.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Me.
Put me off here.
Sorry.
Why not just give it to the town and say, here, town, keep this in your hip pocket. And when you agree to our plan for expansion, there you go. We've given you $100,000. You're going to pay for it, but we started you off with 100,000. Why sit with $100,000 in our pockets, which is all we're doing? And right now, I don't know what the interest rate is right now, but I was talking to my bank advisor this morning. The interest rates are going to be 0.5 to 0.6, less than 1%. Well, why sit? Let the town worry about it.
Isn't it just bookkeeping, Morris?
It's factual bookkeeping.
If I may, just a few points for the board to consider. So pulling aside the question of whether or not the Public Libraries Act and the board should have access to independent funds. We currently make, not a lot, about $1,500 to $2,000 in interest a year. All of our reserve funds that the town holds, we get no interest. They collect the interest and it doesn't come to us. So right there, considering we only make about $2,500 in donations in a year, the majority of our donations currently are the interest that we would lose if we gave it to the town. The second piece to keep in mind is, yes, 100,000 is a drop in the bucket when you're talking about a building, and the development charge fund has been altered, so libraries no longer need to be putting in 10%. But the public will is going to be that the library board is going to be expected to put funds in for any expansion. And if we hold the 10% expectation, that means for $1 million project, we have to put in 100,000. So if we are talking about a $3 million project, which is what the expansion that we had talked about being here was going to be, about $3 to $4 million if we were including town, 3 if it was just us. That means that we are 1/3 of the way of what we would need to raise. If we give it to the town, granted, it is given over to the town, but just like development charges, it's a council resolution that can be changed by the next council resolution. So currently, we hold the funds and only this board makes decisions on how that fund is used. If the funds are given to council, any council moving forward or finance moving forward can make decisions on how those are going to be used, and we are completely out of the loop. So that's my thinking on it. The Public Libraries Act is very clear about where library money should be held, and it should be held in an account in the board's name.
Yes, I agree with that, Sabrina. I looked that part up. Yes, we have to have a fund. We have to have a bank account in which to put money. This money, this $100,000, and I have the history upstairs in my desk. That 100,000 developed from was specifically stipulated for expansion of the library. It did not come from $1,500. Sorry, it did not come from subscriptions or donations. It came from one donation. It has been sitting there since day one, and nothing has been done. It has earned interest, yes, whatever it might be. But when you're talking about let's not talk about a $1 million library expansion. Let's talk a $5 million library expansion. Where does your 100,000 come from now? We give it to them with the stipulation that we get recognition for that, first of all, and that it must go to the library expansion. Yes, Lori.
I see absolutely no merit in doing that, and
Yes,
keeping the money under the library's control and making it quite clear that it's a internally restricted reserve for the purpose that it was originally used, which was the expansion of the library, is important.
Okay.
I think we need to keep it.
Means
And
symbolically important.
Well, it's symbolically important to make sure that it's clear that it's a reserve fund for that purpose. So I think there's been some confusion about what its purpose is.
No, excuse me, Lori, there isn't. It is specifically designated for library expansion.
I'm saying that not sure that everybody was clear on that. I just want to make sure that I think it is now. And if we to pass the motion to make, that it's clearly internally restricted reserve fund for that purpose, that would be fine. I'd be happy to move that motion. But I think
you don't have to. It's on our books. That motion was passed. I forget the date. I have it upstairs. Ruth Prince looked into this a long time ago for specifically this reason. And Sabrina, I think you have to agree with me on that particular one.
It is, and in 2019, the board did say that they wanted to pass a clearer resolution that was our resolution as opposed to the town who had given the funds to us, because it was not on our books that way, that it was internally restricted. And it also speaks not of Blue Mountains Public Library, but Ellie Shore. So that's something that we may want to adjust to say it is an internally restricted, because at the time, the legal name that was being used by people, even though it wasn't legal, was the Ellie Shore Memorial Library. That doesn't exist. That is the name of a branch. It is not the name of our organization. So to actually update that resolution was something we talked about in 2019 report, which is further down in the agenda, to actually clean that up, where it could then be listed as an internally restricted reserve for the purpose of expansion of the Blue Mountains Public Library.
Jesse?
I don't understand this. Are we worrying about the technicalities of who owns the money or what the purposes of the money? Why not simply exchange a letter between the mayor and you confirming the purpose of that money? Then
It
if the
doesn't
matter,
need to be done because it's already on the books. This is just
so does
internal.
it hurt to do it? Why would it hurt to do it? Then you've got something in writing.
I don't think the mayor is confused about it at all.
I don't understand what the issue is. It's, we're just talking about in what name is where the money's going to be held.
And
I agree with you, Lori. I agree with you that it's it should, if it's fully understood as to what the purpose of the money is, then why are we rocking the boat?
I would quote Morris from earlier that let's let sleeping dogs lie. I don't think there's any issues here at all. We all know what the fund is for. It's held by the library and it's earning interest and it's under our control.
I agree with that totally.
And then, yeah, what would we do with that $100,000, Roy?
We'll use it towards expansion of the building
When?
when we have the opportunity to do that.
So another 10 years from now,
Maybe.
Could be.
maybe.
Yeah. Building projects often take a long time to come to fruition and be better off starting fundraising with some money in a hand as opposed to starting from zero. And there's also the issue of the development charges and what percentage do we need to pay towards that. So we have some money in hand exactly for the purposes that we want it for.
You know, I can simplify my position. Forget the 100,000 for just a moment. Somehow or other, a decision is made that the library, I'll say the library is going to be expanded. Somebody comes up with a plan. Somebody comes up with a price. The price is X dollars or X millions of dollars. Why not just let the town pay for that? They're going to pay for it anyway.
The town will pay for that. That is, I mean, it's a town facility, so the town will pay for that.
That's right.
But there
So what
is
do
an
we-
expectation, and the town has already said that in our last meetings with them, that there would be an expectation for us to do some type of capital campaign to bring dollars in addition to the DCs that we already have and any tax rate that would have to be included for tax dollars. That was something that was said clearly in our council meetings, where when we talked about capital campaign and fundraising, it was said by Peter Bourdignon, Councillor Bourdignon, and Councillor Sampson that yes, please start on this because that would be something that would be needed. About that need to be thinking of capital dollars, not to come with their hands out for 100% contribution because it's not in the coffers. And that's part of why council holds DCs in the name of the library, is for that exact purpose, that they know that there is going to have to be expansion at a point in the future. They've already set that priority. Some councils don't set libraries, they just hold DCs in general. Our council did set a library fund specific, and that's tracked and it's reported to us.
Well, I guess the question then is, we're not going to vote on this thing, but we have 8 suggestions of subjects that we should be talking to the mayor, etc. about. Is everyone happy with those 8 subjects?
Yes.
Well, I think as it's been said earlier, we can probably coalesce those down to a fewer number. eight's a lot. And I think the last one we just talked about, I wouldn't bring it forward.
So at this point, the notes that I have, Mr. Chair, are looking at community hubs as one topic, which will be looking at the future of east and west areas, Craigleith being a specific question, and then where we fit in to the planning on community hubs and where the properties fall, again, with community hubs. So community hubs being one topic with a few smaller parts, the broadband issue, and then the finance issue, not necessarily the reserve funding, but certainly how we are going to be looking at the budget, since they have, council has directed that this is going to happen for the 2022 year, and for the Director of Finance, Ruth Prince, myself, to work together and then work with the board and to start working in that direction. So that finance end will be a third area that we have been able to move things into larger categories.
Let me just clarify one thing, Sabrina, if I may. Your discussion, your item there about how the finance business, it is not directly the same as the discussion about reserve funds. They're two different subjects.
No, not at all. I'm just saying finance is a large topic, but we've agreed that the reserve funds are not moving forward. So the only thing left currently in the finance is the budget process for 2022.
Say that again. The reserve fund subject is not moving forward?
That's what the board just said. Yes. So the only topic that's left in the larger category of finance is the 2022 budget process.
When did the reserve fund subject get kicked out?
I believe that's what was just said, is not moving forward with that.
Yeah, and if it helps, maybe I can move a motion about the land reserve fund and making it clear that it's something that the board believes needs to stay as is. And
Okay,
should
we
not
have
be raised in a discussion with the mayor.
We have a motion on the floor. Is there a seconder?
I don't see the necessity for the motion.
I see Joanne is waving her hand, I think.
No, it's okay. I'm waiting for the further discussion.
Wait a minute, we won't have any until we have a seconder.
Oh,
I'll second it.
Sure.
Well, not sure. Dorothy will second that one. Any discussion now?
Why do we need it, Laurie?
Because I think it needs to be clear what the board's position is on this, so that we don't end up raising it accidentally at the meeting with the mayor. or
I
that
thought you
we're-
said earlier that it was already clear as a bell with the board.
I believe it is, but I'm not sure that Morris agrees.
Oh, yes, I do. Of course, I'm the one that raised that, Laurie. I have the paperwork to show that.
Okay, so so you're comfortable then with the idea that the board has taken the $100,000 question you raised off the table at the meeting with the mayor?
I do think we're going round and round the subject here.
Okay. That's why it seems to me it wasn't clear. Because Sabrina had just said that in terms of the discussion on the finance, the remaining question was around assessments. And you didn't think that the question of the reserve was off the table. And I thought the rest of the board did think that it was off the table.
Well, I'm not sure how you can take it off the table without having a vote.
Which is why I proposed the motion.
I thought there was
Just one
consensus.
moment. If you will forgive me, I will go upstairs and I will find this. It's about a 20-page document, 20 pages of documents that I have. And if you give me a moment, I will find the resolution, the date, the time, and the people who made it. Now, take my
What
word
purpose?
only to say that a library board decided, resolved that these funds would be retained in the land reserve fund for the purposes of library expansion.
I believe you. I accept exactly what you say.
There is no question in my mind. And if
Mr. Chair, I have the same document, so I don't think we have to pause the board meeting to get to that point. I think the question at hand is, if we already have this resolution in place and the previous board and this board says we understand the purpose of it, the fact that you as chair are saying you want to give these funds to council is where the question is. I think it's been clear, and we have not passed a vote, and maybe that's what we need to do one more time, as Lori is saying, that it is not something that we are giving up. These funds are the libraries. We don't need to bring up the conversation with the mayor. We simply need to acknowledge internally that we already have this information and not muddy the water. These funds have already been given to the board. The board accepted them. The bylaws and the resolutions were passed. So the conversation is moot unless we are changing that to say we are giving those funds away.
I would like to, what was your motion, Laurie?
Well, it was partly what we don't need is the land reserve fund be an internally restricted, or confirm that the land reserve fund is an internally restricted reserve fund for the purpose of BMPL contribution to expansion of BMPL facilities. And I don't know whether I don't even know if we need that, but my main point was to go on from that to say, in effect, that we don't need any discussion with the town on the topic, which I don't really feel comfortable putting into a motion, frankly.
Well, if I may, as chair, I will say that your first motion is fine. You can make it again if you wish, and I think you have with Gary or Dorothy seconding it. But if you want to make a motion that we do not take that subject to the mayor, then you make that, please, as a separate motion.
Why does,
Should we not do that by consensus?
can I please
Just a second, hang on.
say something?
Jesse has his hands up, Gary, I'll be back.
I'm totally at a loss as to why there's only going to be one meeting. I envisage this, I think I raised this whole subject months ago about there being a small face-to-face between our chair and the mayor and other people on the council. And my thought was that there'd be certainly more than one meeting. I don't think that there's any possibility that we're going to cover, or you're going to be able to cover all these subjects in one meeting. Nor do I think it's necessary. Number two, in terms of Lori's motion, all Lori is doing is moving something which we've already agreed is a fact. So who are we trying to convince? I mean, this is my late partner used to say, this is making certainty doubly sure. But it's,
Okay, Gary, you had something to say. You'd want to say something.
Well, my point was, I thought we agreed by consensus that we don't want to raise the issue of the reserve fund. It's a moot point.
Well, Gary, as chair, I'm sorry, I did not see that consensus. I did not ask for, was there a consensus? It was never, and because it's, yes, it's mine, but I'll be darned, it never came up for discussion whether or not we'd take it to the mayor.
And that's why I started out with a motion to clarify that we would not. And I think Gary's proposing that we, rather than making a formal motion, that we do maybe a quick poll to have some consensus on that, so that's clear.
why do you need a motion for what he's going to discuss with the mayor? I don't understand that.
I think
That's how not our agendas are created.
my concern is I think it's important not to be raising any questions about this $100,000.
Couldn't agree more.
So how do we make
That's the consensus of the board, and I think Morris has to listen to that.
Gary?
Just further to that, I think Sabrina actually summarized all of our 8 points into 3 nice headings, and I think that's a great starting point.
I'm sorry, I did miss part of that.
Okay, so I think Sabrina summarized our 8 points into 3 broader categories, which leaves out the reserve part of it, but it had a finance component next year's budget, and I think that's perfect. That's the way I heard it.
Well, hang on. Before we go any further, we do have a motion on the floor, and if I read the motion from memory correctly, or in essence, is that the library board retains that land reserve fund, $100,000, with the express purpose of it only be used for library expansions.
Yeah, so confirm that the Land Reserve Fund is an internally restricted reserve for the purpose of Blue Mountains Public Library's expansion of the Blue Mountain Public Library facilities.
And there was a seconder. That motion is on the floor. Can we decide on that at least? All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And myself. That's fine. It is carried. That the forever and anon, those funds stay under our control.
As previously known.
Well, yes. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Jesse. Okay. Now, we talk about consensus. I think a lot of board meetings could be by consensus, but it doesn't seem to be too popular here. We either have a motion to send this subject to the discussion with the mayor, or we don't do it. Would someone care to move whether or not we move it? We send it to, we take it to the mayor.
I would prefer, as Gary suggested, we do a quick straw poll and just see, is it included in any of the meetings with the mayor or not? And say, is it included, or say that it not be included in a discussion with the mayor? In a quick show of hands, it doesn't show up as a motion.
Not binding then.
Well,
So
you-
if I may, since the chair would like this to be a formal motion, it could be worded as, is there a mover and seconder to discuss reserve funds further with council? And it will either have a mover and seconder or not.
Could you repeat that again?
If reserve funds will be brought forward for conversations according to OC 2.3.
No, if I may, let's make it positive. Would someone care to move that the subject of reserve funds be discussed with the mayor?
Subject of reserve funds.
The only reserve, the land reserve fund, then identify it that way.
I would oppose that.
I beg your pardon?
I would totally oppose that.
Well, how would you phrase the motion then, Jesse?
Well, I don't want a motion about that. That's not a subject that should be on the floor at all. We've got our 100,000. It's in the bank. What more do we want? Is there a different fund that we're talking about than the 100 grand?
Well, no, we're not, but I'm looking at this with fiscal management in view, and that's one of our jobs. We're letting 100,000 sit there earning virtually nothing. Let them have the problem.
Ah, that's a different story.
But it's part of the background.
Then somebody should make a motion that the 100,000 be invested in a more productive than bank interest. Like a five-year GIC or something like that.
Which would offer 1.8%.
Which is double what we're getting now.
Probably, maybe triple what we're getting now.
But
that's all we will get.
But I think the point is that we would get nothing if the money went to the town.
Exactly.
We're getting more than that now.
And at 1.8%, you'd get, let me see, $1,000 in change.
Which is better than nothing if it went to the town, is my point.
We're currently making just over $1,500 a year in interest.
On
a one-year GIC.
Yeah.
We certainly could invest it in a different level, but Lori is correct. If it goes into the town's coffers, they collect the interest, not us.
Yes,
so
but
then we would be effectively giving away $1,500 a year.
Yes,
Mr.
but we're going
Chairman.
to get a guarantee that we'll get it back when we do the expansion.
We would not get back any interest because we don't collect interest on any of our reserves. The town does.
Chairman, can I make a comment, please?
Yes,
you know,
yes, Jesse.
time is valuable here. We're going to set up a meeting with the mayor. And I don't follow the reason why there are not more important things to discuss than who owns the $100,000. I mean, surely the question of whether or not our budget should be tied to the tax rate is more important than whether or not they're going to agree that we own 100. Come on, I mean, surely there's more important stuff to talk about. Can we move to a different subject?
Well then, look, I made the suggestion. It's as good a suggestion as the others. It's a suggestion. And
I have a motion.
Yes.
I have a motion. I move that the question of the reserve fund not be discussed with the mayor.
Is there a seconder to that motion? Laurie, all in favor? Carried. We will not discuss that with the mayor. And on record, we have resolved that the funds will be retained, or we retain control, and isn't that correct, Sabrina? Nothing changes.
Nothing has changed. No, we still maintain these.
When we come up for a renewal for what to do with those funds in August, September sometime, we're going to say reinvest at about 0.8%.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question through you of Rob?
Yeah, of course.
Rob, what are the prospects that we can get a letter signed by the mayor confirming that the $100,000, whatever the number is owned by the board and is to be used for library expansion?
I don't see any reason we wouldn't. I think that's just the way it is in the budget. So it's not really up to the mayor. It's our money, and the mayor could confirm that, I guess, if we desire that.
That would be
Well,
fine
the
with
mayor,
me.
just
Yeah.
so you know, if that is something that we want, the mayor is going to call me and ask me to provide the same documentation again so that he has it in record to be able to provide a letter back. So it
Great.
feels very circular and not needed. I think, you know, the discussion on this was
Probably it is
definitely
needed.
fulsome, but I don't think it is needed. I think it's opinion, and the board has voted, and now there's one voice according to our policies. And I know I'm overstepping here as the CEO, and I'm just saying that I think it's time.
Can I go back to the actual meeting with the mayor and the summary that Sabrina, you gave? I didn't hear any question about leisure activities plan or the master facility plan, and any update or how the library can be involved or anything. I know it kind of ties in with the hub question, and maybe it is already captured in that, but I just wanted to be sure that that is one of the topics. And I do agree with you, Jesse, that we're really talking about quarterly meetings here, and that we don't have to try and do everything in the first meeting. I was seeing them, and I think as you were, is that it's a little bit more casual. It's not, a meeting with an agenda. It's more like a conversation around
Yes.
some of the important topics that fall on to both of our plates. And so more of a casual conversation. We can't really do it in person over coffee as we would like, but that's more the spirit of it. And it's about building relationship and communicating on topics that are important to the two organizations.
I agree.
The
Yeah,
leisure activities
that's my
plan.
concept too. So
Yeah, and the leisure activities plan would be part of the community hub discussion, but it is a piece independent that's really important for us to hit, because the leisure activities plan committee has just made a decision last month that recreation is only recreation and not culture. And although they talk about where the library fits into some community hubs, they've specifically said they're not talking about the library and the museum. So we are not part of the leisure activities plan discussion, even though council specifically said the leisure activity plan needs to be completed in order to get the master recreation guide done, which then will inform where the library's expansion happens. So we're in a situation where the new direction has completely removed us from the equation, which makes it very difficult to be at a place in the end where we're part of a community hub discussion, since we've currently been eliminated by the committee by their new mandate.
I think that should then be the topic of discussion, is where do we fit into the, I think that should have its own separate heading then.
Yeah.
I would agree then.
Well, then, to summarize this thing, Laurie and Sabrina and I will sit down and we will work out a sort of a plan as to the subjects that we'll talk to the mayor and the deputy mayor and Sean Everett about. And we'll do it on a casual basis. And if we
Right.
don't get them all done or don't cover them all, that's fine too. We'll raise them in the next quarter.
Agreed.
Okay, you
Yes.
all happy? We're finished with that subject?
I'm
We'll
happy
move
with
on to
that.
Number 5.
Let me just pull up
Sabrina.
the agenda, because I think everyone has forgotten where we are now.
We're talking about action item number OC1-1, finalizing the board training plan.
Yes.
You're saying here that this item should be finalized by April. Anything else to add there, Sabrina?
No, I think that we've touched on OLBA webinars as being a piece.
Mhm.
We haven't put in any major board training for this year, and instead moved most of our budget into more of the facilitated discussions for achieving the plan and achieving the next strategic plan.
Okay. Let's move on to item number F4, strategic plan goal, vibrant spaces. Tell me about that again, Sabrina. Your liaison with the senior management staff about the master facilities and etc.
So I think that we're at a point now where there's a bit of a stalemate, because the direction of the committee that's going to be doing the work has been given a mandate that we're not part of the main discussion because culture is not part of that discussion. That's where our funds come from as a ministry. It's where we fit on the larger plan in council. Although they do talk about the library in the hub standpoint. So I do think that this question of where do we fit with our facilities plan, our leisure activity plan, how we fit into community hubs, this will be informed by what comes out of the next meetings with the mayor, deputy mayor, CAO. And I believe at some point we are going to have to begin to move back into the larger council discussions, because again, until it's actually on the record, it's just discussion. So we are going to have to start to make headway on this so that we make sure that when council does move into their community hub discussions, we're not once again left out of it.
Okay. Any comments, questions for Sabrina?
I'm just noticing in the agenda that you're asking, I think, whether we should request a presentation by staff or members of the committee to provide an update. Is that something you still think is a good idea at this stage?
Well, that's what I'm questioning, is if we want to have something presented back to the board, or do we want to start by having this conversation with the mayor and CAO and deputy mayor, and have myself and our vice chair and chair bring it back? And certainly we can always ask later for the committee or the town staff to bring something to the board and actually do a deputation. I think that would be helpful for this board to hear eventually something from that body, whether it be Ryan, the Director of Community Services, or from the actual committee themselves, which would then be by permission of council. I think at some point we probably want to know where we're fitting in on their own thinking as well. So not just council's thinking, but a committee who is informing council.
Who's the chair of that committee?
Sorry, Roy, what did you say?
I'm just wondering who the chair of that committee is.
I'm trying to remember. Rob, is it Councillor Bordenio? I'm trying to remember. I'm sorry.
He's one of the representatives. I believe he's the chair.
Hmm.
And to be honest, I'm not sure I totally understand. So I think it would be great to discuss that in our small group and then figure out where to go from there.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that would be a good way to move on this, because I think we do have to move on it. I think we have to get a little, get behind the wheel on this one.
Right. There was a meeting this afternoon. I missed. It was at 3 o'clock today. So I will
Yeah.
get the notes to see what was discussed this afternoon as well.
Okay.
So I think we can move on to your report, Sabrina, 21-07.
Okay.
21-07, yeah.
So in 2020, we didn't actually have this report. We were doing this in 2018 and 2019, and then 2020 happened. And honestly, it was one of the reports that we stopped making just so that we had more time to provide the services in the unusual circumstances that we're at. So I am trying now to get all of our managers and staff to report back in so that we can provide this type of information to our board so that you have a better understanding of what's happening. So for some of you that may not remember, I'll go over a few of the pieces. There will be a lot of links in this report, and certainly if there's specific things you'd like to see in the future, let us know and we'll add to them. But totals for us are more important than branch. And remembering sometimes LES is the branch and sometimes LES is the library, sometimes museum is CHD, and sometimes CHD includes library. So it's a little confusing in that way. But we try to provide the totals, and I try to provide notes, and hopefully in the future there won't be quite as many annotated notes in there. But recently, when we switched over to a new system, we migrated our system, we began having a dual branch card holding, which is the reason why you'll see that we have over 5,300 for LE Shore and only 300 or just about at CHD. It's not representative of the people who use the depot for library services. It's just we did not go backwards. We've only moved forwards unless somebody asked to change a hold pickup there, for example. So we have our numbers here, and surprisingly, they are actually quite comparable to what we were seeing in 2019 before the pandemic. In many cases, our programs are significantly higher because we're doing more programs and we have higher numbers of people watching those programs. We've tried to do some analytics on our children's programs as well so that we can determine where the local views are and where the global views are, for example. So when the UK resident is watching our story time because it is a really good production quality and their children are looking for something to do as well, we have those numbers, but we really want to focus on who is local, who's using things as much as we can, because we do know that some of these virtual numbers will get quite large when we start looking globally at what's being tapped into. In addition to that, we work through the GLAM. So we will give information about what's happening in the gallery, what's happening in library, which is both branches, and then what's happening from our archives and museum, again, which is predominantly at the depot, but is really both branches and virtual. And then there's two areas that we've added this time that were not in the 2019, which is staffing, which doesn't really fall under any of the GLAMs because it goes across all, and our communication, again, which goes everywhere. Excuse me. And then, like before, I will try as many places as I can, not only to make links, but to list directly which action item this taps into. Not that it is a completion of that action item, but certainly it's all coming back together to be able to say, subscribers to our e-newsletter, we want a goal of 1,500, and this report is tapping into that and then giving you that information. And then this month, which I'll do for the meantime moving forward, I have put in the numbers that have to do with the board viewing, and we'll do that for as long as we're in this situation and using Zoom. So I just wanted to walk through the report, but I'm not going to pull anything out specifically unless you had questions.
Yes, I think it was a great report. Any questions, Sabrina?
Sabrina, you mentioned I guess the 2019 stats compared to the 2020 COVID stats actually compared, the 2020 compared quite well in what's it, circulation.
Mm-hmm.
It does make me wonder whether it's worth for our information is to have a 2019 comparator. So I kind of have the impression that we haven't really dropped any numbers or been very little drop in traditional services because we replaced so many of them with virtual services.
We are just getting ready now to do the numbers for our annual survey, which will give us a wrap up of everything 2020. And I'll be able to present those hopefully at the next board meeting. Definitely the April, but hopefully the March, depending on when we do our closed session meeting, that will compare the typical year, if we could call it that, pre-pandemic years to our previous 2020 year, which is pandemic. And I assume the 21 will be very similar to 2020, although we have an uptick of some of our numbers, but a similar service model. So that will at least give us an understanding of pre-pandemic, 2020 pandemic, and where we can project moving forward.
Mm-hmm. I think there's an awful lot of good news items in this report. The other couple of things jumped out at me was the overdrive shift in the number of titles. Your pop-up seed library, which I think is very ingenious. And on some of the new programs, I even wondered about doing a vaccination facts kind of program. But my point is really more about really, really good news here. Some of it about non-traditional library services and how do we bring that forward so it showcases the 21st century library type of services that we're involved in. Key messages is one good place for it.
These are public documents, so people would read that, Laurie, all that what Sabrina has written.
Well, they have the opportunity to read it, but perhaps they don't actually do it. But these are sorts of things that in that video idea for the annual report to try and pull those sorts of things out. The 21st century service type items, as well as good support for the community in all these different areas.
Mm-hmm.
Good photo ideas there too.
Good point.
Yeah, good point.
Good photo ideas. If we're looking for ideas for photos for our to build up a library of photographs, that would be, there's a lot of good stuff there.
Well, I thought you wanted your photograph taken.
I might, but millions wouldn't. So.
Thank you, Rob. Okay, anything else on Sabrina's report? Or we move on, it's getting a little late. To report number admin 21-06, the provincial lockdown, etc. I was quite intrigued with this, Sabrina, if I may just interject before you say anything. And what your report says is contained in the third and fourth lines of your 1, 2, 3, your fourth paragraph. the Blue Mountains Public Library, Ellie Shore Branch, and Craigleith Heritage Depot facilities will not be open to the public for on-site access in the foreseeable future. That's it's a good report, but that's the essence of what you're saying, isn't it?
Yes. We've made decisions that I know are not the same as what all other libraries are doing at this point, and we are willing to take any flack that comes in that direction. Most of our library patrons who have been responding have actually been happy that we want to continue curbside. And the model that I'm working with at this point is just because we can doesn't mean we should. We are being told by our government, provincial, stay home. And then things have been opened. And I understand the economic impact of why the government has chosen the decisions that they've done, but the service model that we are providing is not going to change much by us letting our building be open and browsable. All of our services from a from a program end are still going to be virtual. The only difference is you come to the door and we hand you a book, or you come in and you have to try to find a book only to find out it's in a back area that we have to get for you anyways. So we've opted to not make a permanent decision, but to evaluate in 2 weeks. Assuming that lockdown has ended on Tuesday, in 14 days from then, we may or may not see numbers continuing to decline or escalating. And at that point, we'll make decisions for the next few weeks if we're going to loosen our restrictions here or stay with curbside. Many of the medical practitioners, local and provincial, health units and provincial, are all saying the same thing. Be prepared. Third wave is coming. We're going to be locking back down. So to open and close our services in a way that makes a few people comfortable to come in, but others don't come in because they're uncomfortable being in the building, feels like it's a step backwards for us. So I know that our neighbors opened up on Tuesday, and good for them if that's what they needed to do in their communities. We're going to take a different approach, and we hope that all of our community will support that, and certainly that the board will support that we are taking a community first perspective and not simply looking at it being because the government said we can do something, we're all going to jump to it.
Thank you.
It is a
Sabrina.
different perspective than others are taking, though.
And as I said, I personally fully endorse what you have put in your report. And to back that up, I would like to make a motion, and I'll read it slowly for you, Sabrina. I move that this board accepts and approves the recommendation from the CEO contained in her report numbered ADM 21.06, dated February the 16th, 2021, that the Blue Mountains Public Library Board, the BMPL, Ellie Shore Branch and Craigleith Heritage Depot facilities will not be open for on-site access in the foreseeable future. You okay with that? Those words, Sabrina? All right.
Yes.
May I have a seconder, please? Rob. All in favor?
Discussion?
I'm sorry. Is there any discussion?
What do you mean by foreseeable future?
Exactly what it says.
We will continue to look at numbers and how directions are going and listen to what our health units are saying, and continue to provide curbside as long as we're not told to stop that. But yes, foreseeable is just an unknown date at this point. Looking forward, we have no intentions of opening up to public browsing.
So I'm wondering, Mr. Chair, whether you might agree to a minor change to provide that the facilities remain closed until the further decision by the board.
I need some clarification on whether this is in fact a board decision. I believe our policy around the pandemic provides Sabrina the authority, the operational authority for this, but really we're affirming support of her decision.
Yes,
Yeah.
I was exactly the same, Lori.
Yeah.
Sabrina has the decision on this, makes the decision, not the board. And that
So
is why I made my motion that we accepted and approved her decision. That
So
was my-
instead of approve, should it be support? Since I know when Morris is saying approve, I hear that as being that you approve in what we're doing, but maybe instead of approve, which has a different connotation in a resolution, support.
What about endorse?
Endorse.
Yeah, I was going to suggest endorse.
Here come the nitpickers.
You're a good crew. Yay, team.
Whatever. Whatever you like, Sabrina, but the essence is there.
Thank you. Much
Any other
appreciated.
discussion on the motion? Rob?
Yeah, just very quickly, I agree with endorse because I think it helps Sabrina that she has our endorsement for this.
Thank you.
Also, I take my medical advice from doctors, not politicians. And the doctors are all saying they're scared to death of what's going to happen if there is a third wave and we've reopened. I think it's better that we are consistent and not jerking the chain up and down, up and down. So I wholly support this idea.
Any other discussion? Are you ready for the motion, for the vote? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. We have two, well, yeah, we need somebody to move that this board receive the strategic plan discussions that we just had. May I have someone to move that, please? Rob and a seconder? Joanne, all in favor? Carries. Moving on to G. Maybe
So
we-
this may be a moot point, Mr. Chair, but I was asked to bring back a report. The original report from 2019, I'm just going to pull this up now. The original report from 2019 and then a summary. So this is our accounts and reserves, including how to actually read the wording that was there of where things live, how they live, and of course, all of these have been passed by bylaws. And then who holds funds, which we've already addressed the investment aspect. And then from the board needing to hold their own account according to the Public Libraries Act. And then some of these numbers are updated from our last months because we do have some new numbers now that we're moving further away from the December 31st of 2020. Specifically, we have the most recent unaudited statement for development charges. So we may have addressed these issues from the previous discussion on reserves, but if there's any questions, I can answer those.
Are there any questions? Well, hearing no questions, what have you, we'll move on. Would someone care to move that this board receive the other business discussions as information, the discussions on the finance report? May I
Also
have
moved.
Over, Gary, seconder? Rob? All in favor? That's carried. Moving on to round table. Maybe I should shut up and let somebody else talk about the round table thing. Anyone got any stuff to bring to the board? Community updates, anything? What are these Blue Mountain events, Sabrina?
So I've started adding some of the events that are coming up that are bigger ones that this way we know the public sees this as well. You see this and you'll know some of our larger events that are coming. You'll notice some have passed because I did it as of the date that the agenda was released. We do have an evening event tonight, but it's just to add to the roundtable to let you know some of the interesting things that are coming up in the period from the board package being released to you and the public until basically the next board package would be released. So nothing to
thank you.
speak of, just that they're there, and if you want to register, please do.
Okay, thank you. Someone move, please, that we receive this information.
So
I
moved.
will.
Oh, I'll take your choice, Sabrina.
I saw Joanne first, and then I heard Jesse.
You did? Again?
And
Okay.
Dorothy was in there too.
Key messages.
Anything
Those
to
were
get
good
into
key
the minutes,
messages, by the
Sabrina.
way. Any comments, suggestions, or thoughts on the key messages that Sabrina has suggested?
I think we need to do some editing around all the discussion we had under the strategic planning items. That, for example, I couldn't keep track of these as we went, but we're planning to hold a special meeting, around that C 2.3. You have to quote that. I don't know, but we had a lot of discussion, and this doesn't mention that at all. I'm just wondering, rather than taking the board's time now, Sabrina, if you would be able to capture some of these items. I don't know if we need to see it again, but knowing that we're looking at, well, most of what the meeting was about isn't actually in this yet at this point.
Yes. I can pull this together and circulate it. And if anybody wants to make any comments that way, we would still need the resolution to approve it for release following the circulated review.
Perfect.
Do you mind with going back to the little item that about this investment, Sabrina? You know the one I'm talking about.
Let me pull that up.
You've said here that we passed a resolution to set the mandate of the Library Land Fund. What were you thinking in terms of, for the public, saying that this investment would do what?
I think that we can alter this now that the board passed a resolution confirming the mandate of the Library Reserve Fund, and then pull it right from the resolution that states that it is a internally restricted fund and for what purpose.
That would be good. But may I suggest that you, instead of saying to set the mandate, maybe reaffirm?
Yes.
Reaffirm. We don't have to quote the one that was done in 2012 or 20, whatever it was.
No, and technically the one that we've just passed now trumps that anyways.
That's true, yeah. But to reaffirm, I think is important to me, if nothing else. Okay.
Yep.
Anything else on those reserve fund, or pardon me, on my mind, key messages?
Well, on the reserve fund, we call it a land fund. We do mean reserve, do we not?
Yeah, land reserve fund, yeah.
Yeah, land reserve fund, yes. Yeah, that's an official title for it. Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Anything else on these key messages? You happy with them?
Should we mention our appointment of Joanne to as a trust to the
Yes.
to the new assembly?
Yes. Joanne will be happy to see that, yes, as a reminder.
So,
We could even put her picture beside it.
We could, yeah.
all right, Rob, that's enough.
Is there any information from the CEO and service update report that you would like included, or would you like to simply note the report and link back to it?
What did you have in mind?
I'm just wondering if the board wanted to focus on any items in there. I know Lori had mentioned a few.
Well, for me, what really stood out was what the acquisition, well, it doesn't like the details, but basically e-magazines is jumping from about 50 magazines to over 3,000, which is a big increase in available resources. I just thought the whole pop-up seed library thing was a beautiful example of an unusual service, but a 21st century library kind of service. And my other one was around some of your planned topics. And my thought had been really vaccination facts would also be a good topic for you to add, but you don't actually have that here at the moment, but that I'm reading.
Okay, let me see. Nothing else on the key messages? Would someone care to move that this board approve the release of the key messages as presented?
And to be amended, right?
Well, that's the difficult part, but yes.
Yeah.
Do we have a seconder? Do we have a mover? Well, I see Rob's waving his hand. Seconder?
Joanne.
Joanne?
Yes.
Oh. All in favor? Anyone against? No. Whatever. We have our next meeting is scheduled for March the 18th at 2 o'clock.
So the question that I have for that, Mr. Chair, is would you like that meeting to be a regular board meeting and the April to be our closed session working on the plan, which would give some time for some planning to be done? Or would you prefer to have the open meeting, our regular meeting in April, and do an early planning in March? Or we could do the regular meeting in March and then have sort of a short closed session to start discussing how we want to move forward. So there's 3 options there.
Well,
Sorry.
I'm really scared to say anything.
If we
what do
think we're
people
going to
feel?
do maybe 30 minutes, 40 minutes of just brainstorming how we want to move forward so that I can work on if we're doing a facilitator, we could do that as a closed session at the end of the board meeting next month. And then hopefully I would be able to get a facilitator in for the April or a potential other date.
Any thoughts, people?
Your choice.
I
I
agree.
think door number 3. That's
I'm sorry, I missed that. Went over my head. What did you say?
I was saying that I would support option number 3.
Yes.
All right, so we'll hold the regular meeting on March 18th, and we will plan for a closed session at the end to begin discussion of C2.3, and hopefully that will provide some direction so that I can move forward with an April or slightly after larger facilitated closed session for the board.
I have a small reservation that, I mean, it might, if we have a closed session at the end of a regular meeting, we might be here till 6 o'clock at night.
That is the issue with canceling our committee meetings, that we're meeting on average 4 hours a month. Yes.
Well, the alternative, of course, is not to have so many things to discuss. However, let's play it by ear. If we have to table something, we can always do that. Everyone happy with that? With
Yes.
what Sabrina said? That's a consensus. Fine. It is now 6 minutes after 5, and I now call this meeting adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.